Okay, thank you and welcome to our session on VMware Cloud on AWS, a technical deep dive. My name is Samir Kadu. I'm a partner solutions architect at AWS dedicated to the partnership with VMware. So anything VMware related in AWS, hopefully I can help you out with. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me after the session. So there are several common challenges that customers have with hybrid cloud adoption. For example, dealing with multiple virtual machine formats. And then even having incongruent networks. Maybe your network on-premise is different than the network in the cloud. Operational inconsistency. Maybe the process that you do with certain VMs on premises would be different than what you would do with VMs in the cloud. And then having to learn new skills and utilize new tools to manage those VMs. And then having multiple control and security and monitoring mechanisms to oversee and control your VMs. But with VMware Cloud on AWS, we're looking to eliminate all of those challenges. So VMware Cloud on AWS will include vSphere, NSX for the networking, vSAN for storage, and then ESXi, which is installed on bare metal hosts. So it's on demand. And you get to sign up for the service with a minimum of 4 hosts. You get to pick which hosts you want to utilize as far as how many you want to have, as long as you have the minimum 4 hosts. The minimum 4 hosts is due to requirements due to vSAN. So it utilizes the latest in software in regards to vCenter Server Appliance, ESXi, NSX, vSAN, and this is fully managed by VMware. So for example, any updates that come out related to that SDDC software stack is taken care of by VMware. So you no longer have to manage yourself. You don't have to deal with any updates. You don't have to deal with firmware upgrades. That's all fully taken care of by VMware. As far as dynamic capacity, you have the ability to add hosts as needed. DRS and HA do come into play. You get to utilize vSAN storage. So vSAN storage will take care of any of your storage that you require for your host-based environment. So your VMs will reside on vSAN. So when I say that, your hosts are going to utilize NVMe flash-based storage. So it's local storage to the hosts that you utilize. NSX, again, takes care of the networking. Each host is going to have what's an ENA, an Elastic Network Interface. So with VMware Cloud on AWS, it's built on the AWS Global Infrastructure. So currently right now, it started off in the Oregon region, and then in Northern Virginia region, and then in March, it was launched in London. And then coming up, it will be in Frankfurt, then Sydney, and Singapore, and Tokyo. What we're trying to do is make one lap around the globe and then hit up the other regions in between. So your compute instances or your bare metal server instances are comprised of an i3 16XL equivalent host. It's dedicated to you. It's not shared with any other customers. It has 36 cores, 72 vCPUs. It also has 512 gigabytes of memory. And then that will have NVMe all-flash storage, which I mentioned before, which is utilized with vSAN. And then that 25 gigabit ENA. So with the hypervisor, it's using VMware's ESXi hypervisor. It's not nested or anything. It's installed directly onto that bare metal host. You can have a minimum of 4 hosts, and then you can expand up to 32 hosts. This is, again, maintained by VMware, but some of the limitations to keep in mind. You do not have SSH access to the host. You do not have root access to the host either. And then you can't install any VIBs or install any plugins into your SDDC environment. So one of the key reasons behind this is because it's managed by VMware, that we don't want to have every customer have their own special environment. So the thing is, by having this model in place, if we need to troubleshoot a dedicated instance, so the host in this case, we can automatically just pull that host out, give you another host, and you see no downtime in being impacted. So we did discuss with vSAN, we did discuss your NSX, but NSX will take care of your logical networking. So what happens is, the networking in your VMware-based environment is all fully managed by NSX. So if you want to assign, just like how you do on-premises today, configure VM networks for your VMs, you can do the same thing with VMware Cloud on AWS. It does allow for north-south firewalling today, There are going to be updates down the road in regards to that. So if you're looking for micro-segmentation as well, some of the features that are currently available with NSX today, those are being slowly deployed out as well. So one of the key things with the service, it's updated every 90 days. So every 90 days, you're going to see what's called a milestone release. And we do advertise that as far as publishing that information on VMware's website. A roadmap is also publicly available on VMware's website. So if you want to do any IPsec termination, you do have that functionality built in with NSX. And then to take care of any NATing, NSX will do that for you as well. So with vSphere, it's fully managed. It's, again, by VMware, as far as you can delegate permissions to your users as needed. And then if you want to set up hybrid linked mode with your on-premises VMware environment, you do have that ability as well. One of the key things to keep in mind is you need to be at vCenter Server 6.0 and above on premises to at least utilize that hybrid linked mode. So now, one of the key things with VMware Cloud on AWS is being able to fully utilize native AWS services. So for example, if you want to have your VMs communicate with an EC2 instance, you have the freedom to do that. If you want your VMs to access an S3 bucket, they can even access an S3 bucket. If you want to utilize RDS, you have the ability to have your VMs access Amazon RDS. And then if you want your VMs to access Amazon Redshift, you do have the functionality built in to do that as well. And then if you even have an AWS Direct Connect in one of your on-premises environments, you do have the ability to leverage that for VMware Cloud on AWS as well. So that will be important when you look into the hybrid setup for VMware Cloud on AWS. And then also Amazon DynamoDB can be utilized as well. So one of the key things to keep in mind is that you can fully mix and match any of the native AWS services with your VMs in VMware Cloud on AWS. Again, this is utilizing the AWS Global Infrastructure. So wherever this service is launched, in whichever region, and whichever services are available in that region will also be dependent from that standpoint as well. So with VMware Cloud on AWS, you do have the option as DR as a service. So what it's utilizing is site recovery. It's going to be based off of Site Recovery Manager that one would have on premises. So if you want to protect your VMs, you now have an option to protect them in VMware Cloud on AWS. So with the hybrid link mode, you do have the option to set up where one vCenter can communicate with vCenter in your VMware Cloud on AWS environment. So that allows that single pane of glass view. Just log into one vCenter, and then you can manage your on-premises environment and VMware Cloud on AWS. Now we'll get into the account structure. What happens is when you sign up for VMware Cloud on AWS, you're going to have what's called a VMware Cloud SDDC account. It's a new AWS account which is dedicated to running your VMware Cloud on AWS environment. It's paid directly by VMware. It's a single tenant account, and it's utilized for all of the SDDC resources. When you sign up for the service, you also have to specify an AWS customer account. If you don't have an AWS account, you can create a new AWS account at that time. But what happens is, with this method and this process, it's going to allow you to have your VMware Cloud on AWS environment linked up with a VPC that exists in your AWS customer account. So that's going to allow for that communication to take place between your VMs that reside in VMware Cloud on AWS with any of the native AWS resources that you have in your AWS account. So to get started with VMware Cloud on AWS, you would have to go to cloud.vmware.com. You're going to log in with your myvmware.com credentials. You're going to set up what's called an organization. And then from there, you could set up your SDDC environment. You can also specify identity and access management. It's not the same identity and access management that you're used to with native AWS, but in regards to a VMware side. So if you want to set up who has access to the portal site at cloud.vmware.com, you can configure that as well. And then when you create a new SDDC, you do have to specify a name for it. you do have to specify the management network CIDR range as well. One key thing with that is once you specify that management network CIDR range, you cannot change it later. So that's a key critical step to keep in mind. Also, with the number of hosts, currently the minimum is 4 hosts, and you do have the ability to expand out to 32 hosts. You don't have to deploy out to 32 hosts right away. You could start out with 4 hosts and then eventually keep adding hosts as needed. Or if you have more than 4 hosts, you can even remove hosts. So one of the key things is with the scalability. And then as far as the region availability, this is available in our Oregon region, Northern Virginia region, and London region. So connecting to your AWS account, what happens is this is going to use a CloudFormation process on the back end. You don't have to do anything yourself. The only thing you have to do is you'll specify a user account that has access to your AWS account. What happens is, in that case, it's going to utilize a CloudFormation template, which inherits a role to set up the linked process between your VMware Cloud and AWS account to your native AWS account. So your VMware Cloud on AWS management service is going to have a user account that inherits access to your AWS account. This allows for that cross-network connectivity and access between your VMs and VMware Cloud on AWS and your native AWS resources. So as far as accessing VMware Cloud on AWS, when you go to the portal site at cloud.vmware.com, you have the ability to add or remove ESXi hosts. You can configure user and role management as needed. So similar to what you would do with an on-premises VMware-based environment, you do have the functionality to set up firewall configuration and rules as needed. If you want to utilize EIP and NAT configuration, so you do have the functionality to do that. And then if you want to set up a VPN connection, you do have the full functionality to download the VPN configuration and deploy it out to one of your on-premises VPN appliances as needed. And that will allow for that communication to take place between your on-premises environment and VMware Cloud on AWS. Then with hybrid linked mode, you do have the ability to utilize the hybrid linked mode setup where you can have that single pane of glass view where you just log into one vCenter server and you can manage your environment from on-premises and also the VMs that exist in VMware Cloud on AWS. You do have the ability to manage your VMs as you do with an on-premises infrastructure. So if you want to edit your VMs as far as adding CPU, adding memory to it, you do have that option. If you want to set up VM storage policies, you do have that option as well. Now we'll discuss the overlay network. So what happens is with VMware Cloud on AWS, you're going to have a VPC that exists in the VMware Cloud on AWS account. But to take care of the networking for your VMs, you're going to have what's called a management network overlay. And that's going to be where your vCenter server appliance resides, the NSX manager resides, and if there's any additional VMware-based products from a management standpoint, they will reside in that network as well. And the VMs that you deploy will reside in the compute gateway. So with the customer workloads, it shows over here, it's going to be in what's called the compute gateway. And that will take care of the networking of your VMs that reside in VMware Cloud on AWS. If you want your VMs to communicate with the open internet, you do have the option to set up and open up specific ports as needed. So if any VMs need to have that open internet communication or specific ports open, you do have that flexibility as well. So in regards to your account connectivity, what happens is when you define your AWS account, you're going to pick a VPC within your AWS account that you want to have the connectivity established with your VMware Cloud on AWS environment. You're going to have that minimum 4 hosts in your VMware Cloud on AWS environment. It's going to communicate through the ENAs actually, which will then communicate and update the route tables with the specific IP addresses of the hosts that exist in your VMware Cloud on AWS environment. So one of the key things is if you were to have an issue with a host in your VMware Cloud on AWS environment, that compute gateway is actually remotioned over to another host, and then the route table is updated accordingly. So that way you won't see any downtime as far as communicating with your vCenter server appliance. Your VMs will also not see any downtime as well. If you want to have a hybrid connection set up between on-premises and VMware Cloud on AWS, you do have several options. So if you're going from your customer data center to your customer-owned AWS account, currently today you would do that with an IPsec VPN or even a direct connect. If you're going between VMware Cloud on AWS to your customer-owned AWS account, you can set up VPC ENIs for the compute gateway. And then from the management side, you do have the option to utilize a direct connect, and then you can utilize public VIF as well. So this is one of the key things that you will look into if you're setting up a hybrid environment. So this will take into account the network connectivity to the management network, the connectivity to the compute network. So this is going to allow you to have your VMs communicate between on-premises and your VMware Cloud on AWS environment. Also, secondly, if you do want to have any management access as far as with the hybrid setup, being able to log into one vCenter server appliance and being able to manage your VMware Cloud on an AWS environment, this will allow that as well. So you would have that for your VMK, your VM kernel network. The communication will take place over your direct connect, and then you can utilize a private VIF for that communication. And then from the VPN connectivity standpoint, that will allow the communication for your compute network. So any of your VMs that you want to do a live vMotion with, you don't have to take any outage for your VMs. You can do a live vMotion with them. You don't have to necessarily re-IP them either. So you can be up and running right away, vMotion your VMs as needed right away as well. And then if you want to have multi-region support, you do have that option as well. So if you're utilizing something like Amazon Redshift, obviously with that way that service works, multi-region comes into play. So if you want to have any of your VM resources in VMware Cloud on AWS access that, you do have the functionality to access that as well. Again, there's several ways to set that up. If you do want to go over the open internet, set up an IPsec VPN between one VMware Cloud on AWS environment and another VMware Cloud on AWS environment, you do have that flexibility as well. So if you want to have multiple SDDCs in multiple regions, that can be done. So we'll discuss some customer use cases. So some of the key customer use cases come down to cloud migrations, which might include application-specific migrations. Maybe you want to migrate a particular application stack, or maybe you want to move your whole data center from on-premises to the cloud. Maybe you're even going through an infrastructure refresh. So rather than refreshing your on-premises hardware, you're looking for a way for your VMware VMs to still exist today as they are, a simple, quick, easy way to migrate them to the cloud. Maybe you're going through a data center extension. So if you want to expand your global footprint, you can utilize AWS for that. With our global footprint, once VMware Cloud on AWS is available in all the regions, you'll be able to utilize that global footprint to your advantage. Maybe you want to have on-demand capacity. So with VMware Cloud on AWS, you can add hosts as needed, you can remove hosts as needed. It's fully flexible from that standpoint. Maybe you want to move just a test dev environment. You do have that option to do that rather than setting up a separate VMware-based environment on premises. And then from a DR perspective, maybe you want to protect additional workloads or certain type of workloads that you want to have protected. Now you have a quick, easy way to protect those workloads. And then with DR, data center replacement, maybe you want to move out of a DR data center, and now you have that option to have that DR exist in the cloud. Lastly, maybe you're looking to add or modernize your solutions from a DR perspective. So now you have that way to leverage the cloud to modernize your DR capabilities. So now we'll go through a quick demo, which will show you how a live vMotion takes place. So for example, we're logging into our vCenter server that exists in VMware Cloud on AWS. It's going to utilize the HTML5 client. You do see both vCenters are set up in this, so you have that hybrid linked mode set up. So the first one is our on-premises environment. We're going to pick a VM to vMotion. It's just like how you would do on-premises today. Right-click on it, and then you would select Migrate. And then if you want to, in this case, since you're going from one geolocation to another geolocation or one vCenter server to another that do not have shared storage, you would have to set up where you select the option to migrate both your VM in itself from a compute perspective and also storage perspective. You pick the data store that you want to send it to. In this case, it's a workloads data store. You pick the folder you want to send it to as well. Pick the network. In this case, it's using the same network that we have on premises, so you do not have to re-IP your VM. So that's a critical step, because rather than having to vMotion it to another environment, going through a re-IP process, you do not have to do that. Now you can see the VM did migrate over So it was a live vMotion that did take place. No downtime was impacted to that VM. So now it's showing where the initial process took place, where you take that first initial snapshot. Now it's doing the delta and the change of that VM, which is being migrated to VMware Cloud on AWS. Obviously, this is going to depend on the size of the VM, so keep that in mind. Maybe you're using a VM that has multiple drives. They could be sized 100 gigabytes each. That is going to impact the speed as far as how it migrates over from a live vMotion perspective. Also, this is dependent on the network connectivity that you have between on-premises and your VMware Cloud and AWS environment. So now we'll go to the vCenter server for our VMware Cloud on AWS environment. If you go to Compute Resources, you'll see that that VM has been successfully migrated over. And then to that point of DR as a service, so this is built on top of an updated version of Site Recovery Manager, which is what you might have today in your on-premises environment. So it's updated to support VMware Cloud on AWS. It allows you to pick and choose whichever VM, so it's delivered as a service. It's a la carte. Obviously, it's built on Site Recovery Manager. It provides an application-centric DR runbook. So through that runbook, you specify what the process is to bring up a particular application stack. For example, if there's a dependency of which VMs to bring up before you bring up your application VM, you can specify that as well. If you have to re-IP anything, you can specify that as well too. If you need to remove any dedicated DR data centers, you do have that ability as well to do that by replacing it with Site Recovery. And it does integrate deeply with VMware Cloud on AWS. So actually, this is fully available right through the console at cloud.vmware.com. Again, it's DR as a service. So if you want to protect your VMs, you select which VMs to protect. You pay a la carte per VM. So rather than picking your whole environment, you pick and choose which VMs to protect. So some of the latest updates. So actually, March 7th, we announced several updates. For example, it was launched in our London region. Now stretch clusters are in preview. So one of the key things customers tend to ask is with VMware Cloud on AWS today, it was only offered in one AZ. What about if you want to have stretch clustering? Now you can utilize multiple AZs. So when you deploy your SDDC, you pick multiple AZs, and it will automatically deploy out to those AZs. One key thing to keep in mind is that with that setup, you have to have a minimum of 6 hosts. We'll put 3 hosts in one AZ, another 3 hosts in a different AZ. This does allow for 0 RPO, high availability between those AZs. It's built into the infrastructure layer, so it allows for synchronous replication. And then also it takes care of your logical networking. So in regards to HA, DRS, that's all factored in. If one AZ goes down, it would be treated as an HA event, and then your VMs are automatically brought back up without any disruption in the secondary AZ. As far as usability improvements, so Tunnel Status Monitor has been enabled in preview. So if you want to access that, you can just sign up, let VMware know. They'll grant you preview access for that. Firewall Rule Accelerator is also in preview. So if you want to modify and fine-tune your firewall rules, you do have that option to do that through that preview. And then Layer 2 VPN client resiliency is also deployed. Also to that note, DR compression has also been enabled, your storage compression has been enabled with your vSAN storage. And then this slide is showcasing the third-party technology partners that we have available. Obviously, you can see there's a wide variety that's available. So from data protection, data services, storage, networking, key management, DevOps, cloud planning, security. This is expanding on a daily basis. So if there's a particular third-party tool that you utilize today, by all means, feel free to check out our website or VMware's website to see if it is available and compatible as far as being certified for VMware Cloud on AWS. So some additional resources that you can access. If you go to cloud.vmware.com, you'll have the option to see some additional information in regards to VMware Cloud on AWS. You can even go to our website at aws.amazon.com/VMware. And also there is a VMware Cloud blog that's available at blog.cloud.vmware.com. And we'd also have a YouTube channel. So if you want to see any of the demos that were presented at reInvent, at VMworld, by all means, feel free to check out that YouTube channel, and we have the sessions available to you. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to come up. I'm happy to help out. Thank you.